Imagine joining a Monday stand-up feeling optimistic, only to sense tension in a single teammate's voice. 10 minutes later, the whole call feels heavy. Ideas dry up, and everyone's video squares look lifeless. What just happened? That invisible mood swing is emotional contagion. And in remote teams, it travels faster than fiber optic signals. With AI tools mediating more of our conversations, learning to harness rather than fall victim to this force is mission critical. Today, we'll decode the science and give you actionable ways to flip harmful contagion into collective energy. As I go through today's talk, there's a lot of science behind this. I'm sure that you have felt it. Many people talk about it. Zoom fatigue, being online all the time. It's a lot of science behind it. It's not just a personality thing. There are aspects of working remotely, and especially, specifically, working the technologies that we have today that contribute to us not feeling at our best or feeling tired after a while of working online. So we're going to go through some of those aspects, what's going on and how they factor into our emotional states, our psychology, that then results in impact to the individuals and to teams. And this emotional contagion really is like a viral spread. Is once it gets started, it moves very, very, very quickly. And the aspects of the technology that we're using contribute to it, making it even a stronger factor that can quickly derail teams. So it's something that's really worth understanding and realizing what's happening to us, to our physical bodies, as we're going through these online meetings, so that we can work around it and we can be better, have better understanding, and have better tools in some cases to deal with it. So try to imagine how quickly things shift. You could be in a planning meeting, for example, and your planning meeting starts off really productive, and within 5 minutes, it turns toxic. What's happening? You have people logged in, and the product owner starts talking about the new features, the new capabilities that need to be built, and everybody's really excited about it, really engaged, contributing well, giving good ideas. So far, everything looks great. And then the trigger. A senior developer gives an audible sigh when view the backlog, or they make a comment, or they put something in chat. It can be something really, really, really small, and it has a big effect. I've talked before, and when we talk about psychological safety, one of the things that happens with psychological safety that can get us out of the psychologically safe space is very, very unintentional scenarios. It can be because of somebody's title. It can be because of somebody's tenure in the company. If we have different roles within a team, that can contribute a lot. And in fact, it's one of the reasons why we recommend not having hierarchically differentiating titles. Because when you have somebody with those heavier titles, that anything that they say can have this added weight, and that added weight undermines psychological safety. So we need to be really careful when we're speaking, and realize that even a small comment can have a cascading effect. And this cascading effect, people pick up on it really quickly. It doesn't take much. And all of a sudden, you have really big impact in the team. From everybody being engaged and participating and talking, all of a sudden the screens start going quiet, or they go dark. What happened? People tell you, it's like, oh, I'm having bandwidth issues. No, maybe, but no. Sometimes what's really happening is that they're tuning out. They don't want to deal with the situation. Why? What's going on? When somebody communicates their emotional state, people pick up on that and they mimic it. Sometimes this is not something that they're doing consciously. It's just something that has affected us. It's something that has entered this space. It's like putting a drop of ink in a glass. You put the drop of ink and immediately it permeates across the entire glass of water. It's like that. It's all it takes is just that one drop, and all of a sudden you're having a response. People are reacting to it, and people are not consciously aware of it, but the effects are there. So let's start to a difference so we understand what we mean by emotional contagion and its aspects. There's a scientific basis behind it, and it's an unconscious mimicry of emotional states. An important aspect there is it's unconscious and it's mimicry, it's mimicking, it's acting like what's around in our environment. It's automatic. How does we manifest? Automatic facial muscle activation, for example, or synchronized breathing patterns. Um, Vocal pitch and tempo can be another aspect. This creates shared psychological states that spread through our nonverbal cues. I've mentioned in other videos how the brain processes enormous amounts of information and it filters out so that from a conscious perspective, we're not aware of all the information that the brain is processing, but the brain is processing all everything that's happening. And it includes many of the nonverbal cues that I'm referring to. The brain is aware of these things. And as social animals, we pick up on these details and we respond to them. And emotional contagion is, again, an autonomous mimicry of those elements that we're putting out there. Now, let's distinguish it from empathy. Empathy is a conscious process. We are aware that somebody's experiencing something, and we are expressing some type of response to what we're understanding. But there's a cognitive process. We are aware. Contagion happens without awareness. It's also different from groupthink, where in groupthink there's a cognitive alignment to a belief, a perspective, something that has been said. Emotional contagion does not. It's just an emotional response. So it's feeling based. It happens faster than rational processing. It's a response, it's a reaction. There's a lot of study behind this. There's a historical context to describe it. It comes from work from Hatfield, Cacioppo, I think is his name, and Ruspo. This is research from 1994. And the original studies were focusing on the effects of physical proximity and the behavioral, the social behavioral and interactions. They measured physical muscle, facial muscle micro movements, for example. And that they proved that this is a response that happens across cultures and different contexts. So this is a human response. And it has to do with the way in which we interact as social beings with other people. Now, when we're talking about remote work, the interesting aspect is that remote work has the ability or the characteristic that it amplifies the effect of emotional contagion. And it has to do many times with the type of technology that we're using and the limitations of the technology that we're using. Just think very plainly, we're dealing with a 2D space, not 3D space, yet we're accustomed to live in 3D space. So it's very strange. It creates a different context for the brain to be processing information. And that change in context requires additional processing from the brain. That contributes to the fatigue that comes from always being online. Another thing that can happen is, for example, the audio. Yes, the audio, we can say that the audio sounds great, no problem. But the audio compression technologies, they narrow the frequency range. That's different to what our brain is accustomed to processing. So it creates, again, an additional processing and interpretation of the audio information that we are receiving. Another way in which remote work affects us is we remove a lot of environmental buffers. That contributes again to that fatigue. You're not walking from room to room to get to meetings, for example. Those walks, even though sometimes you may be rushing and hurrying to get from meeting to meeting, there's an advantage to that in that it gives the brain an ability to change context and to reset and sometimes rest, even though you may not feel very rested from running, but your brain is in a rested state compared to always being online and always processing information and always filling in the gaps for the information that the technology is not giving us. The fidelity that we're accustomed to from real world interactions. Like I mentioned, audio being compressed. We don't notice it consciously, but our brain does, and it has to compensate for it. There's no transition when we're working remotely. There's no transition between interactions. You're just going from one interaction to the other to the other. Another thing that factors in is the home environment. While there are many advantages to working remotely, and I don't want this talk to be misinterpreted as a sanctioning or criticizing remote work as not being good and effective. It is. There are many advantages. We're able to leverage talent that is outside of our commute radius. That alone is a huge business advantage. Psychologically, there's a lot of advantages for people to be away from work, physically from a work office, where they can have those breaks, create those breaks in a home context. Which for some people, that can be extremely rewarding and uplifting. So there's a lot of benefits. And there are some challenges, and these are some of these challenges. So you miss, for example, casual pre-meeting chats. Those low friction, more lively kind of exchanges, those can lead to really good interactions, learning from others, and also give the opportunity to make a human connection. That human connection is something that will help in the business relationship, because we're no longer just dealing with a coworker, we're dealing with a human being. We miss out on those. So anything that we can do to recreate that is really important. A lot of people have criticized Agile coaches for having all of these cutesy type of icebreakers. There's a reason for that. They compensate, they're a way of compensating for those missed casual interactions. So we're creating them through those artificial interactions. Some can be a little silly, I agree, and they do serve a purpose. So don't dismiss them. If there's something that you can find that your team enjoys and is open to doing without just feeling that, oh, this is a silly thing, there's a real benefit to having those. When we're not having physical movement, and we're just always at the desk and always online, and that can have discomfort, physical discomfort, that can affect our mood, and then we communicate that, even though we're in the meeting and we're well engaged, and we can be happy in the meeting, but there's that undertone. Again, this is not conscious, or we're communicating it, and people pick up on that. And that leads to triggering this emotional contagion. So we can also experience this in also another factor related to the technology, always using text to communicate. Text messages very easily can be interpreted as being angry messages. Or literally, we drop our filters. We put something in writing that we would not necessarily have said to somebody if they had been standing right in front of us. And when we do that, now we've got this negative message put out there in black and white that can have some very serious consequences. Interpreting tone when we're just looking at text, that's very difficult. Most people are familiar with that. Using all uppercases, for example, is another one. Sharing screenshots as a kind of evidence. And this just happened, and here it is, the evidence. There's a lot of factors where the technologies and how we use them influence our emotional states. And once we are in this altered emotional state, that is going to contribute to the emotional contagion. We're bringing this in. Again, this is not conscious. This is not deliberate. This is not something that we intend to affect our teams and the way that we behave. However, it does have an effect. People pick up on it. Some technologies that we use increase the heaviness of this through features that on the surface appear to be very useful and very nice, but in reality, they create some challenges. Slack's activity sorting, for example. Well, if you've got a heated debate, that's the one that everybody is going to see right at the top of the sort. Not necessarily the best way to be dealing with something, especially something that's heated. Or overuse of emojis, for example. That can be another very triggering thing for a lot of people. If you use at channel messages, for example, those force attention. And that forcing attention, this is a constant interruption. From a lean perspective, we want to remain as focused as possible on something. We want to avoid task shifting. Some people call it multitasking. But that task shifting dilutes our focus. And why do we want to avoid that? Because our brain is able to process similar things, like things, much faster. If you have a batch of them, it can process them much faster if you line them up and you group them together and you remain focused on doing that, as opposed to having different type of things that you're doing, which requires resetting your mental context in order to execute on the next thing. It can be milliseconds, but those milliseconds will tire us after a while, and they will prevent us from being able to really deliver the best quality work and the deepest attention to detail, the most mindful work, because we're constantly switching our attention, our focus on different things. So there's a lot of aspects in which our technology that we're using is creating challenges for us. It's triggering emotional responses, and that is measurable. There are MRI studies that show that the effects of what we see on screens, they're similar to what happens in face-to-face real life interactions, but they are reduced in magnitude. They affect the same regions of the brain, but they affect the brain in a different way. So that leads to, in a similar way to that compression, audio compression that I was talking about, in the space of video, for example, when you're looking at somebody, believe it or not, the video quality of your computer can have an impact. If you have a larger screen with higher fidelity, that provides closer to real world experience, and therefore our brain is more attuned to it. It can work better with it. But if you have a reduced quality of video output, it will have an impact, because your brain is going to have to fill in the gaps. And that additional processing is going to have an impact on how you feel. And the disruption doesn't have to be very large. It's something that's imperceptible to you. You won't be consciously aware of it, but your brain is aware of it, and your brain is dealing with it. Another aspect, going back to audio, for example, is delays, or video, but it applies to both audio and video. Delays. If there's a lag between somebody saying something and the receiving it, as little as 150 millisecond delays will break the natural synchronization. Our brain will notice that. Our brain will notice that, and it will be disoriented. It has to work extra in order to compensate for this misalignment. It breaks the natural conversation rhythm, and that can be frustrating. Sometimes you can feel frustrated, and it's not about anything about the conversation and what's going on. It's actually the digital medium that we're working on. And this isn't just limited to remote work. Because we've digitized so much of our work, even within an office, you get to deal with these issues. So this is pervasive. This is something that we need to learn. As technology improves, these kind of issues will decrease, we hope, over time. Maybe we'll introduce 3D interfaces that will add more fidelity, more data that our brain can process in a more natural way. But until we get to that, our brain is processing and dealing with this, even if we're just at the office, because we're working in a digitized environment. It's not just exclusive to remote work. So all of these things, that the additional effort that the brain is having to do, increases frustration. And that leads to a feeling of feeling tired, more tired when we're online. When we're remote, of course, it's all the time. And that leads to that emotional reaction. And we're conveying that emotional reaction in an automatic way. We don't mean to, but that's going to have an effect on the rest of our team. Other examples is when your screen freezes, or if you have any pixelation, the audio is not in sync with your video. This was one thing that I learned early on doing YouTube videos. My video was just slightly off, and you could see that my lips weren't in sync with the audio. That made watching, so go back and watch some of my earlier videos. They're terrible in many ways. And this is one of the aspects that made them terrible, is the audio wasn't in sync. And that can make it really difficult to follow the video. You're better off just shutting off the video and listening, because there is that additional processing that your brain needs to do. So all of these things are adding pressure to our brain. And as a result, it's affecting us, how we're feeling. It's affecting our emotions. And we convey that. Team picks up on it. And now all of a sudden, our entire team is derailed. Again, we don't mean to do that. There's no, it's not anything conscious, is not something intentional. But that is how we land in these kinds of situations. So the cognitive load for filling the gaps is significant. And as a result, we also introduce unreliable information. Again, in other videos, I've mentioned how our brain tends to fill in the gaps. That's just the way that the brain works when we're missing information. And it usually uses worst case scenarios to fill in those gaps. So we're talking about different type of information that the brain is filling. It's not filling in because it's missing a fact or it's missing some detail about the conversation. But because there is information that the brain is missing, it is going to fill in those gaps with not the best data. And as a result, it's going to create some conflict for the brain. You're not aware of it. This is not a conscious process, but it's part of what's tiring our brain as we're going into our online meetings, especially our remote meetings. So this amplifies stress. The digital channels that we're using create an amplification of stresses that we're going through. You're constantly under attack, essentially, from all of these digital channels. Just think of the number of interruptions that you deal with on a daily basis. There's an average study that says 96 interruptions daily, probably higher. All of this is increasing the amount of cortisol going through your body, and that is going to have an effect on your emotional, how you're feeling. The anticipatory stress builds up. The fear of missing out, FOMO, is driving us. And that comes as a result of all of these digital systems that are constantly interrupting us, that are constantly providing more information, more feedback, the expectations that we are on top of things, the perception from others, when we respond, when we don't respond. All of these factors are influencing. And that is going to have a negative effect on our productivity, on our ability to focus, on our ability to deliver the highest quality work. Just simply the context switching, in dealing with all of these interruptions, hours of our day are lost as a result of it. And that's going to add to our stress. And again, this creates an emotional state that we're communicating to people through all these digital mediums. So there's a lot of effect that we're dealing with. We're not allowing ourselves to take a break. Sometimes going to the bathroom is the only break that we get. Because people are working remotely, there's a tendency to overwork. This was one of the things that came out of COVID. Instead of the assumption that, oh, people were just simply going to do nothing during COVID, we actually saw increases in productivity. People were very, very productive. Part of it is the not wanting to be perceived precisely as not doing anything. People overcompensate. But also, because we're there and we're connected, always connected, we're always responding. That's keeping us on. There is no ability to switch off from what we're doing. And that is going to lead to fatigue. Stanford did a research on this, assumed fatigue, and there's a neurological basis for feeling that way. And there's a cognitive load from always looking at yourself on screen. That's another thing. We're not accustomed to it. I don't know if it's happened to you, but many times I've watched myself. I'm in meetings, and when I'm talking, I'm looking at myself instead of looking at everybody else. As a coach, that's actually very dangerous. I need to be paying attention to everybody else, how everybody else is responding with what I'm saying, for example. Yet we're conditioned. So many times I turn off my self-view. There are advantages to having the self-view, and there's disadvantages to having that self-view. So we need to be mindful of how we're using the technology, because that can affect how we're feeling. And an interesting part of the Stanford study is that women are affected more severely by the effects of being online and having all these online technology limitations and effects. So we need to create some kind of buffer. We need to give ourselves an opportunity to reset. We need to be watching for the negative states that we go into, and also watching how the teams are impacted. If we're seeing that our team is responding in a negative way, having an emotional monitor in teams can be very helpful. These are people who can be watching out for when the emotional states are shifting. When they see that something has put the team in a negative state, then just chime in and say, hey, team, I noticed that there's been a shift in the mood. Do we need a break? Encourage people to stand up, move. Um, when our eyes are constantly looking at a screen, that's hyper focusing, visual focusing, not mental focusing. And that hyper visual focusing will absolutely tire us. That can actually damage our eyesight. So our eyes are not designed for that. Our eyes are designed to always be looking around. Think when you're outside, your eyes aren't focused in one place. They're always moving around. Our eye muscles are being exercised. When you're online, your eyes are always in one position. It's like overexerting any other muscle in the body. It's like you're overworking one muscle. And that will lead to tiring, frustration, and all the things that I've been talking about. So just when you detect, when the emotional monitor in the team detects that the team has gone into that space, just encouraging people to look around, to stand up, to move, that can have a really good effect, or at least prevent the accelerating the effects that the team is feeling. Leaders can help us, obviously, as always, in this, recognizing the effects, talking openly about them, sharing with people when they feel affected by always being online, by the digital systems that we're using, sharing how, for example, the emails and the emojis, how they get affected by them. Just share with all of us. That can be very helpful. And it can help us have conversations around it. It can increase our awareness of how this is affecting us. And it can help us take a step back. The technologies are good. They're getting better. And having awareness of how they're affecting us can really help us improve. So always check in, check with the team. When you detect that there's been a shift in the team, you were doing great, all of a sudden you're not doing well. What happened? It could be emotional contagion. So ask the team and recognize that psychological safety can be broken just by one message, by one sigh. That can be enough to derail everything. When it happens, acknowledge it, have a conversation around it, and then move on. But if we ignore it, the frustration, the tiredness can become really heavy for the team and make it very difficult for the team to recover. And there's really no good reason for it. It's not like there is significant disagreement or significant friction or strife within the team. It's just that the team has encountered this subliminal condition, and they're struggling working their way through it. AI mediation can help us. A lot of AI monitoring systems that are being introduced in the workplace can detect shifts in the team's responses. They can detect that teams have become less engaged, and they can keep track. And this is where privacy is really important to be very mindful and very careful about. But they can detect the patterns, the normal patterns that people have, and see that they tend to respond at certain rates, and all of a sudden the rates have shifted. Understanding that and using that information not to grade or somehow judge the individual, always stay away from looking at individuals, but instead looking at the effects on the teams and understanding that something has shifted. If we have an AI system that alerts us that there's been a shift in the team, that can be very helpful, because then that signals the moment to do something different, have a different conversation, have a different meeting, physically move around, doing things to help us compensate and deal with the shift that has just happened. So this is where AI can help us moving into the future. And so the combination of better technologies that work better with our human brains and having AI giving us additional insight into what's happening, the shifts that the teams are experiencing, that individuals are experiencing, can be really helpful to help us navigate through the challenges presented by the remote work, and more specifically by the digital aspects that we are working with. And that's a good differentiation. Working remotely, it's not about the physical location. It is about the technologies that we're using, the digital technologies that we're using, and the limitations that they have and how they affect us as human beings. So keep that in mind. Always be alert. Talk to your teams. Get the support from leadership to help you to navigate through this, and just apply remedies and have the conversation, and share this information with your teams. When people are aware that this is happening to them, that can help as well. As I mentioned in another video, when we're dealing with difficult situations, just labeling them can help us deal with them. Same thing here. If we have a conversation and we label it and we're aware of what may be happening, that can help us deal with it and diminish the effects. And that can help us change perceptions. It wasn't that somebody was being mean. It wasn't that somebody was checking out. It wasn't all of the mental stories that we create. It was just that people were dealing with the technology and the effects that they have on us as a result of working remotely and in digital work. So with all of that, set up a plan, develop more mindfulness on how the technology is affecting us, leverage the technology in the best way possible so that you get the benefits from it. When you get derailed, have an action plan, implement it, and then have a conversation in your retrospectives about how it's helping you on the type of challenges that you're still experiencing. And with that, if you'd like to learn more about why emotional intelligence is so important to help us get the maximum benefits of what AI has to offer, including insights into how the digital world is affecting us, click one of these. I'll be happy to tell you all about it.